Hmm.
Can you do that question?
I had a different caption as I had to probably put it in.
Yeah, World War II is pretty fun.
You think God is punishing me for having an abortion? Girl, the Lord is changing
Xbox.
you blowing out volcanoes and making Super Bowl winners. It's been so hard not having anyone to talk to, especially Noah. I mean, he knows that it was my fault, but he doesn't say it, and that I appreciate. I know he's still blaming it. Or maybe he is. Okay, honey, we've all done things in our past that we're not proud of.
Yo,
Like, I've
we
been 83 and counting.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out how to deal with it. I just may have to close up shop.
It's the prison.
What do you mean? I'm gonna roll up that welcome mat.
I never found the prison so easy.
Right there, man, that's gonna last 26 years of service. This factory. Now,
Please do not follow me to the prison. Now I'm scared now. Why am I saying now? Now. Marco, yeah, I'm saying you know how to do it. Oh yes, gotta move. This one.
Yes, I am. Oh, you don't let me get out. Right. You know what I tried to get in the house with?
It's dangerous, they understand, or most of them do the damage he can do to the system of governance that relies to a surprising degree on norms rather than rules, and whose vulnerability has been newly exposed. They know or should know about the ways Trump's vanity and avarice are harming American interests relative to competitors like Russia and China and partners and allies in North America, Europe, and the Pacific. So talk to me about that, because I mean that's a pretty big statement, and I encourage everyone to read this article in The Atlantic. It is amazing. So talk to me about that. Tell us why you wrote it.
So here's the argument I was trying to make. I was using the analogy of the so-called open secret of sexual harassment, especially in Hollywood, and the way that's spread through other realms. And after these stories have come out with a very extensive New York Times report on Harvey Weinstein, there was all this reaction, of course, this was an open secret, everybody knew it, et cetera, which raises the question, why did nobody do anything about it? Which I think is the moment of accountability. There's something like that in politics. I'm not really talking about the public, because a year plus ago, people knew who Donald Trump was and they made their choice one way or another. I think the crucial thing is the part of the American system right now that could do something about this is the Congress, where the Republicans have a majority both in the Senate and the House, and they could have hearings, they could have investigations, they could require tax forms, they could make sure that witnesses come in and talk about foreign entanglements. And I know, and anybody who's in journalism at all knows, that the Republicans are aware of this. When they have their moments of feeling liberated, like Bob Corker or Jeff Flake or some others, they say, look, this is a problem with the way Donald Trump is. But they're institutionally not doing anything about it. And that's what the point I was trying to make, that's where our focus should be, on the one group that could do something about it.
Or your quote is that they could act and they don't. And you're talking about Republicans. Is this a failure of responsibility? You said they should be having hearings or what have you, but is this a failure of responsibility?
I think it is, and I think that if, I bet you know this yourself, I won't press you, but most people in journalism know that if you're talking with a Republican elected official right now, and you say, what do you really think is going on with the president's administration, the first thing they'll say is, let's go off the record. And once you do that, they'll say, yeah, this is a real problem, we don't know what he's going to do, we're glad that Madison and McMaster are there, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is taking the next step for their checks and balances, separation of power, accountability, even if just two of them would constitute a majority in the Senate, would say, let's have some hearings, like the Watergate hearings, of a generation plus ago, or even like the Benghazi hearings of recent memory. So I think they will look back on this and wonder, as in the McCarthy era, as in the civil rights era, as in other eras, why they didn't do more, why more didn't do the right thing. And that's the point I was trying to make.
So what do you say to supporters of the president and members of his administration who say, you know, it is grotesque and beyond the pale to question the president's fitness, or and I'm sure that they are going to criticize you for suggesting hearings?
So there have been hearings, you'll recall, that Bill Clinton was actually impeached by the House of Representatives, 20 years ago for failings that were really bad, but I bet in history's eyes will be seen as smaller than the financial ones and others that are going on now. It is a tradition in our public and history to question power. That's part of what our founders set up, and I think that the Republican Congress, they were no slouches in holding accountability hearings during the Obama administration for the Attorney General, for the Secretary of State, or for others. So their curiosity, if there weren't the partisan issue, would be mobilized to say, what do we know about the finances here? What do we know about our tax returns? So I would say that this is a matter to privately, off the record, many elected officials, Republicans, will tell you the same thing I'm telling you now on the record as a non-elected journalist.
Listen, it was no coincidence that the White House allowed cameras to film President's meeting on immigration today. A senior administration official says to CNN that it was done explicitly to put to rest the hyperventilation about him, including questions about his mental fitness, to rest. So, was it a success, you think?
I guess, like many things in the administration, people judge in different ways. On the one hand, the president's affect seemed much more amiable than in some of his other recent appearances. On the other hand, as many of your guests have pointed out and commentary the last few hours, it was as if he wasn't on the program with what the official Republican position is. And Representative McCarthy had to sort of step in there and say, well, actually, what we want is something different from what you're saying, Mr. President. So I think that as a matter of personal demeanor, it may have had the effect that the White House was looking for, of seeing a more relaxed, comfortable. Probably this is what Donald Trump thought being president would be like.
Yeah, listen, the Rapid Response Director for the RNC released a statement saying this, that many in the media have spent the last week hyperventilating over a phony writer's opinions, but the American people just witnessed President Trump lead arguably the most transparent, substantive policy discussion with Congress maybe ever. What do you think of that?
So that is just, if your view of history started like 2 weeks ago, you could say this was the most substantive ever. Bill Clinton, after he was elected, had these several day-long marathons with economic advisors and Congress people about what his economic recovery plan would be. Barack Obama had these various seminars too on economics and on recovery plans for the auto industry. Both of the President Bushes had extensive interactions with congressional members. So this probably is the most thorough thing we've seen from Donald Trump. But if your memory reaches before the previous the 45th president, you've seen different examples.
James Fallon, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Don.
When we come back, testimony from the man whose firm paid for the infamous Trump dossier